got any queries that we need to be sorted. I've just seen that Simon has started the recording, so that's great. I'm assuming therefore, Simon, that because it's come up on my screen that everything's okay with the recording, so we're all right to go ahead.
Appears to be, Chair, yes.
Super. So that recording is will be made available on the CJC's website and YouTube channel in the future, as is normal. So first of all, getting onto the agenda, or before I start with the agenda, we've got the agenda today, and at the end of it, there will be a briefing for members. So we all need to just stay put. The recording will be switched off, and then we can move forward on that. But moving on to today's agenda, the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Do we have any today?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Andrew Morgan and Councillor Rhiann Howells.
Super. Excellent. And then any declarations of interest? So it's any interest to declare, and if so, the nature of those interests, and the monitoring officer can comment. So have we got any interest today? No, nobody's shouting, so that's super. So agenda item 3, if I can just get on to that, we've got the terms of reference for the subcommittee, and they're fairly straightforward. Can I suggest that we note those unless there are any comments? And have we got anybody to move and second that?
Move those minutes, Chair.
Super.
I'll second them, Chair.
Sorry, my computer suddenly went quiet. Thanks, Bronwyn and Anne. That's super. Then moving on to the nomination for the Regional Growth Board, there is a report to this. I understand that Jane, you're going to talk us through this one.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Members will see from the terms of reference of the Regional Growth Board that there's a requirement that one of your membership be nominated to that board. And similarly, there's a requirement that one member from the Strategic Development Subcommittee also be nominated to that board. At present, we're just flagging the nomination requirement to this committee, and it'll be at your next meeting that we'll seek a formal nomination. Thank you, Chair.
Super. So if you have a look at the proposed process, on page 3, it says that it's proposed that nomination for a member to sit on the RGB takes place at the Regional Transport Subcommittee meeting scheduled for the 19th of September 2024. So, and obviously it also states that if anyone's got any queries, etc., they can either be answered through by the CJC officers, or if appropriate, the chair of the Regional Growth Board. So if we're happy to agree those, can I have a mover and seconder?
Happy to move, Chair.
Thanks, Anne.
I'll second.
Second, Chair.
So we've got a run off between John and Bronwyn there, so that's great.
I'll give way to Bronwyn.
I think that's always a wise move. She's actually in the room next to me, so I'm being careful what I'm saying. So yes, that's fine. There doesn't appear to be any dissent on that, so we can move forward. I suppose we're now on to agenda item 5, which is the Regional Transport Plan, the Case for Change and Scheme Prioritisation Tool, which is in effect probably the big item of today. So if I can invite, I think it's Colin is
Yes.
going to take us forward on that. Thanks.
Many thanks, Chair, and grateful to members and others for the attention to this item. You'll note from the cover report, the recommendations that we have here are to, for Regional Transport Subcommittee to note the progress against the Regional Transport Plan, which we'll cover, but also to recommend the draft case for change and scheme prioritisation tool to be endorsed by South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee, and also to authorise officers to undertake consultation with stakeholders and consultation bodies. For the purpose of this item, it is chunky, so I will lead off with an overview of the case for change, Transport for CCR. I will pass to my colleague Claire, who will talk through some of the detail of the case for change, and then we will pass to our colleague from Transport for Wales, Louis Vaughan, who will talk to the scheme prioritisation tool. At which point we can take questions. Chair, if it's easier, we can take questions at the end of each section, if that's more suitable.
I think that sounds reasonable, but at the same time, I think if anybody's got any burning questions, they shouldn't be prevented from raising a hand and asking at that point. Thanks.
Absolutely, it's a substantive item, so as is required. I think just to start this with a little bit of context, then I'll pull up some slides. Look, this is a deeply collaborative piece of work. We've been working with Welsh Government and Transport for Wales colleagues, but critically with transport officers and now members on developing this case for change. I think to set the context and be very clear, the case for change, which is the first item we'll cover, is the first step on the road to a regional transport plan. What we're trying to do here is to set forward CCR's ambition as a region for transport, how transport works with our new statutory powers across spatial planning and economic wellbeing, and we'll go into that in a little bit more depth. But also, it should express what's unique about our region, and that's being honest about the challenges we have and opening up some of the potential solutions, including, as we put in here, very broad objectives for us to work with both consultation bodies, officers, members, and others, and importantly, the public, to understand where those targets should be. So I shall pop up a presentation which we will cover off, and hopefully that's visible for everyone. Great. Just pop this up on full screen. Sorry, I've jumped ahead a little bit. So what we'll cover off as part of this presentation is effectively a walkthrough of Transport for CCR, the case for change. That's starting with the policy context, then looking about our region, and then Claire will go into the challenges, opportunities, and so forth. So if I just set the policy context here. So Cardiff Capital Region, we were established initially as a city deal in 2017 and have now transitioned to be a corporate joint committee. However, as a city deal, we were able to identify through our regional economic and industrial plan in 2 iterations, importantly, what the 4 missions we believe we face as a region. When we look at these, we know that we've got economic disparity and we have a need to boost growth. We have a need to address the economic and the social challenges in the region. We understand, and statistically, we know that innovation capability and capacity, which can be an inhibitor to growth, needs to be improved in the region. Like our national government, Welsh Government, and like the UK government and local authorities, we recognise that this drive for net zero to decarbonise our environment is utterly critical. But likewise, as a region, and more unique to us, that we need to improve our physical and our digital infrastructure. When we look at those missions and those challenges, one could take the view that transport relates more to one than another, and we actually make a strong argument that transport is a critical enabler for each of them in different ways. So our focus as a region, through our regional economic and industrial plan, has always been and continues to be about a bigger, or potentially what should be better phrased, a stronger, fairer and greener region. We need to generate good growth and also create the conditions for shared prosperity across the 10 local authorities across our region. So this new public body, the South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee, one of 4 in Wales, is just a mechanism by which we'll do that. So we want our region to be more competitive, connected and resilient, and we try to get that to bleed through in everything that we do. And likewise, with our regional economic industrial plan and strategic business plan, we're trying to set the context for that. One thing it's worth pointing out at this stage is that we see inclusivity and sustainability as the equal of productivity. These are critical things that we need to target. We can't favour one against the other. And so for us, it's important that, again, transport and our approach to transport takes that in mind. So just as a reminder to members and to others, that the Corporate Joint Committee was really, I came around through the Local Government and Elections Wales Act in 2021. And the whole purpose is to provide a framework for greater local authority collaboration and drive, as is noted here, a more coherent, consistent, simplified and democratically controlled mechanism for regional working. This is new in Wales. So even though technically and legally we're known as the South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee, because we've been operating as the Cardiff Capital Region since 2017, that's how we continue to be publicly known. So if you hear us use those terms interchangeably, I do apologise. I'll cover each of our statutory powers and various levels of detail, obviously focus on regional transport, but we have a statutory power for as a new regional body to deliver economic well-being. This is a concurrent power. It's our job to work with local authorities, Welsh, UK, the region, to understand how do we deliver that. We will put agreements in place to that end, and our regional economic industrial plan is really the driver for this statutory power. We've also recently, from the 1st of April formation, we have powers against strategic spatial planning, and that is primarily going to be articulated through the production of a strategic development plan for the region, which is a longer term endeavour. This would be a long-term plan with a range of about 25 years. And we would anticipate, going on the current progress, of having a delivery agreement in place by the end of this calendar year, hopefully by 2030, 2031, and working across our local authority partners and others, that we would see a strategic spatial development plan come together by around about 2030 or 2031. It's critical in the interim that we continue to work with local development plans, and they must be kept up to date, as we note here. Let's come on to regional transport, which is the meat of the conversation today. And the case for change is important. It sets this policy context that through this recent transition, we now have this unique opportunity to develop transformational regional policy and intervention. So transport for us, as is expressed in the case for change, is not the end in itself. It's our means to deliver on our vision for a bigger, stronger, and greener economy. So this golden triangle, we like, of transport, planning and economy creates the conditions to do this. It has a distinctive contribution to make in planning for the future of our region. And I think we're all acutely aware of some of the challenges, and we'll outline those as part of the case for change. But it isn't just about improving travel or transit. Partnership working is going to be critical to delivering on economic growth as a result of this. So to make members aware of progress, we've got detailed guidance, which was issued by Welsh Government last year. So we have an obligation to prepare a regional transport plan to set out the overall vision, if you like, and objectives for regional transport in the region. This will incorporate a regional transport delivery plan and an integrated wellbeing appraisal. Following approval of the RTE implementation plan in late 2023, we received funding from Welsh Government for development of the plan itself. So that's the stage that we're in now. The focus for June to September is really development and approval of the case for change. We hope to do today. Consultation and stakeholder engagement is going to be critical over the coming months, and starting to develop a draft regional transport plan. So I'm going to pass over to Claire, who's going to go into the detail in the case for change, where we have an overview of our region, what makes us unique, and what some of the challenges are we face.
Thanks, Carl. So our Transport for the CCR is the document, which is our case for change, which sets out an explanation of our diverse and distinct region, and it shows how the transport network plays a key role in meeting our requirements in terms of making us connected, resilient and competitive. So it gives some data around, for example, 95% of the total population growth in Wales is concentrated only in 4 of our authorities. So it explains about the inequalities and the significant issues we have to resolve, around ageing population, for example, and working age people and different trends. Call next slide, please. So it explains in our document about the societal issues that need to be addressed and how transport can help move the dial on equality across South East Wales. Explains that our ambitions about having an efficient transport network that mainly gives the freedoms to people to travel to suit their needs, but not just their needs, their wants, and explains that this is essential if our goals are to be met. It offers some highlights and evidences significant issues around equality and sustainability, and it uses current data to set the current state of affairs within the CCR in respect of transport. Next slide, Carl. So there's significant impacts on the environment, as we all know, and the document shows how transport has an impact on the environment, particularly around air pollution, noise pollution, greenhouse gases, but also around road resilience. It also explains about how cars have got such an impact on the traffic volumes and congestion across our strategic highway network. So currently the document explains about travel behaviours pre and post COVID. It explains that we're predominantly a car-based region. With travel to work, 62% of travel to work pattern is by car at the moment. And it also explains that in our region, we have a significantly higher amount of people working from home than the rest of Wales. We have a third of the population working from home compared to the average of 25.6% across Wales. Next slide. So we've identified a load of challenges and opportunities across the transport agenda in our region. We've highlighted the assets across the region. We've identified that it's the largest asset group. The highway network is the largest asset group in the public sector. And whilst it's the implementation strategies to look after the asset has historically been planned by the local authorities and is definitely the programmes to enhance the asset is delivered by the local authorities. The new CJC requirements put the onus on the strategy to on the CJC rather than the individual local authorities. It also identifies that the asset is worth about in excess of £12 billion, and to replace it all along with the land, it is more than £20 billion. Next slide. So we've taken an approach using data as evidence. We've identified all of the different modes of travel, and we've looked at high-level challenges and opportunities for each of those modes to help us identify the gaps and what would be needed to address those issues. Next slide, Carl. So in order for us to write the regional or prepare the regional transport plan, we have to have a set of objectives. We've tied those objectives with the regional economic industrial plan and our strategic goals across the region to be competitive, connected and resilient. We've identified 3 objectives in under each of those headings. However, those objectives are deliberately broad to spur some public and stakeholder engagement, and will be refined to become smart once we go out to full consultation and engagement. So in terms of our goals, for our competitive goals is all about innovation-led growth and higher levels of productivity, and we've got 3 transport objectives tied to that one. In Connected, we're looking at the physical and digital infrastructure required through new technologies and community initiatives that embrace the decarbonisation agenda. So it's not just, we're taking sustainability into account as well when considering those goals. And then resilient is not just resilient about prosperity across the region for our citizens and to address the social and economic disparities across our region, but it's also about road resilience and ensuring that we have the right tools to enable us to address the issues around climate change and the impacts on our network that is damaging our environment. So to enable us to do that, we've identified a number of enablers to help us in preparing the plan. First one being innovation and our approach to innovation, looking at challenge, research and development, higher education, and looking at all opportunities to embed innovation into the plan. We've looked at investment, not just public sector investment, but looking at new models of driving investment, from the private sector, from borrowing and various other opportunities in respect of overseas investors and a wide variety of different opportunities, because public sector funding is not going to touch what is required to enable us to move that dial to any kind of significance. We're heavily relying on data to make sure that we understand what the issues are and to make sure that we can address them suitably. And we're looking to work with through partnerships with all sorts of bodies to enable this to happen, because the CJC in itself or the local authorities are not going to be able to make this happen on their own. We need a huge variety of partners to allow this to happen. So in terms of the next steps in our engagement plan, we have identified a two-phase engagement strategy. First one being with key stakeholders around the development of the case for change and the document that we've got presented today, as well as the work that the set of criteria that TFW are going to be presenting shortly. And then we can take the feedback and move that into the next stages of the next few months of actually preparing the regional transport plan, the regional transport development plan, and the integrated wellbeing appraisal to enable us to have a sound plan within the time frame required. So that's it from me.
Yeah, so that concludes the presentation on the case for change. A couple of brief notes to that end. We discussed in a briefing with members about the integrated wellbeing assessment. We've met with Welsh Government and Transport for Wales with the draft IWBA, and we've at a point we need to run policies through that IWA to test it, so that we've agreed that will move to the next milestone, which will be with the regional transport plan. So the IWA will be coming forward at that stage. Just one other point as well, we've ingested members' comments following the last meeting into the updated case for change, the Transport for CCR document. However, happy at this point to potentially, Chair, if it's suitable, take questions, observations, and further feedback. Thank you.
Thanks, Colin. Very much so. And I'm just thinking it's probably easier because you've got you can also see the hands up on screen if you take the questions as
Sure.
You see them.
Super, thank you. Can I go to Councillor Morgan first, if that's okay?
Thank you, Cole. Much welcome this document. Mine is a comment, to be quite honest. It is a way forward. I know that yourself and other members done a lot of work on it. So just to say how pleased I am, and in my authority, but they are also pleased with this coming forward.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Greatly appreciate that. And the process for developing the regional transport plan itself is going to be very involved. It's going to be very collaborative. So, you know, obviously it's critical that we continue to engage with members, but also with officers who have been so important to get to this stage. Thank you. Councillor Death, I'll turn to you now. Thanks.
Hello, morning all. Thank you very much. Just two quick questions from me, if that's all right. I mean, firstly, I was wondering what's the position regarding supporting road schemes? Do you think we need to make reference to the roads review principles in the document? And secondly, it mentions demand management and road user charging. I think that's around section 6.2.
Yeah.
I think. Do you think we also need to include that in the table of opportunities?
I'll take the latter point. I'll defer to Claire on the former. Absolutely, yes. Look, the reality is that, you know, without speaking out of turn, that, you know, the public finances are not in a position whereby when we look at the schemes that will come forward to address the opportunities and challenges in the region, that public sector funding in and of itself is not going to be enough. And we know that we need private sector investment. We know that we have the opportunity to leverage that, but we also need to look at innovative and novel ways by which we can continue to leverage the revenue needed. And that means understanding how those schemes work. So absolutely, Councillor, that would be the case. Claire, do you want to speak to the first point that the Councillor made?
Yeah, in respect to the roads review, Welsh Government are looking at updating the roads review as we speak. We are having constant conversations with Welsh Government officers in respect of that. It looks like that we will be allowed to put forward road schemes in the context of the road review, but what is being addressed is it's being made more clear how we can do that. So it's more it's going to be targeting the economic benefit, but also doing it in a way that is more sustainable. For example, there is one road scheme that has recently been agreed where they've changed the design of the road so that the road is not as wide, so there's less tarmac, for example. So, and the drainage is falling on one side, so you haven't got drainage on both sides of the road, so it's only on one side, which makes it more sustainable in terms of materials, less materials, better drainage, etc. So instead of value engineering in terms of affordability, is, you know, they're recommending value engineering in terms of sustainability. The one local authority that have done this well recently, we're asking to come to the officer group to explain that to the officers in the first instance, to see how all 10 local authorities can benefit from that, and you know, get an understanding of how it can work, you know, and can be acceptable. So that's the first stage, but we're very closely working with Welsh Government to make sure that we can feed that into the plan then to make sure we get the maximum benefits.
Yeah. I mean, what point was just about referencing those principles in the actual document. I don't know if that would be useful.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Thank you, Councillor Death. And to make the point, you know, obviously the external environment is changing. So we have to be, you know, both operationally and strategically a little bit agile, don't we, in developing a document like this to respond to the opportunities that may come along. Can I go to Councillor Mibby, please?
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for taking on board the comments that we've already made. There's one big issue that still really concerns me, and I think there's scope within this plan to take that on board. I'm particularly interested in the issue around road condition and the point. What I hadn't understood, that the idea that the CJC will start to take responsibility on that rather than it purely falling on local authorities. If I've understood correctly what was said earlier, that's something I hadn't previously understood. I do think it's a much bigger issue than any one local authority can deal with. And something in relation to that strikes me, and this is very much going from our practical issues that we deal with day to day and taking that back to this strategic focus. there's a mismatch between the size of vehicles, which are ever increasing, and our rural roads and our town and village roads. And in terms of transport planning, I mean, an obvious practical solution, but a very difficult one to implement, is to have large scale transport for long distance and to have a clear shift down to smaller scale transport when you get to rural roads and villages. That isn't happening at the moment. That's not there in commercial behavior. And I think we're coming to a crisis point, because actually we have a situation where businesses seem to expect us to alter our towns and villages to adapt to the size of the vehicles. That's not physically possible. It may be possible with some of our rural roads, but the expense would be massive. And I just think that it's such an important issue, and it links so much with the issue of road condition and the economy focus of this plan. I just think it's something that to bring. I don't know to what extent this is an obvious problem with the bigger cities in this region, but I imagine that this will be reflected in the other more rural or semi-rural authorities. So I just wanted to put that one in there, because I don't know any other scope, any other environment in which this issue can be raised.
In respect of your first point, Councillor Maybe, maintenance is included in the regional transport plan. It is, for planning purposes, but it is still expected that the local authorities will deliver on that. So I just want to make that clear. In terms of the Road Resilience Fund, for example, it's a case of the solutions, etc., would be in the plan to address, and the priorities would be in the plan to address, but it would still be down to local authorities to deliver on. So in respect of your, we did take on board what you said in respect of the size of vehicles and, the potential for freight hubs, which is what I think you're alluding to. Obviously, a lot of that is outside of our control, but it has taken on board in the case of change that there is an issue, and then hopefully we can identify in the plan how we could potentially address that through lobbying, through the commercial sector, etc., or whatever. But it's definitely been put into the, it's been identified as a challenge in the document now, and then we hopefully over the coming months we can expand on that to look at how we could address that issue.
Thank you.
To briefly respond to that as well, Councillor, maybe you're absolutely right, because there is, if we're talking about a case for change, it's not just about transport for transport's sake, then we've got to talk about outcomes that aren't just for their own sake. And I think there's that notion of, as a newly formed public body, we do have the opportunity to work across multiple areas and to lobby and to influence. So that's a really, really good point. It may be an issue that you could see as a transport issue. Actually, its impact and its reach is much wider, isn't it? So thank you. If I go to Councillor Brooks, please.
Thank you very much. It's just a few points I'd like to raise, particularly around the Vale of Glamorgan in particular. I feel that there's a crucial link missing within this strategy particularly around the Vale of Glamorgan. You've got, coming from Cardiff and surrounding areas, you've got all that Vale, got all the enterprise zone, you've got the airports. There's absolutely no mention of places like CCR Energy, which is obviously a huge impact that can have on our local economy, jobs and transport and travel in particular, and also Bro Taffin as well. I really would like to see a little bit more emphasis around that, because it's a really strategic development area, and I think that we're missing a bit of a trick there. At the moment, public links and public transport to those areas are really poor, very, very poor. And there's obviously a lot of housing development in that area as well, which obviously then goes with those sort of enterprise zones. And then obviously if you move further then down into the Vale, I mean, public transport is absolutely abysmal. Absolutely abysmal. You cannot get anywhere. And it's no surprise that I know one village in particular in the rural Vale, 88% of those travelling use cars, because there is no option for them, because the public transport is so desperately poor and unreliable that they have no choice but to resort to cars. If they want to go to work, leisure activities, anything has to be by car. And I mean, 88%, that's a really, really high number. So it's areas like that, we really need to make sure that that is at the heart of this. I suppose another comment as well is around the consultation. Talked about, there's going to be wide and far reaching. I think it's crucial that we actually go into the very heart of our communities and talk to people as well about the issues that they're facing on public transport. We don't do that. If we just do it at a high level, we're not going to get that information that we desperately need, that will drive this document.
Fabulous. Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Just to respond to the first point on so there are a number of strategic sites in the region. So what we've been doing is going around working with local authorities and LPAs as well, to understand where the targeted growth is going to be. So we could look at with the Vale for absolutely CCR Energy and Aberthaw is significant. We also have opportunities coming through as part of the investment zone where we're going to see significant commercial development and growth. Yeah. So as part of developing the regional transport plan, we need to start to see that alignment of where we know there will be targeted growth in the region, where we know there's, if you like, a policy on scenario where new things are coming through, which are going to see growth, and start to align that with the regional transport. So absolutely, sorry if it's not come through completely in the case for change as is at the moment, but those strategic sites in the region will start to come through within the next 3-4 months as we work with local authority partners. And absolutely, we've got to get people, we've got to think about how do we get access to those sites sustainably. So that's at the forefront, and Claire might want to come in on that. The second part on the consultation, again, not meaning to be near evangelistic about this, but couldn't agree more. The people who know how well the transport system works or doesn't work are the people who use it every day. So our intention, we've already engaged with partners who could potentially deliver this for us, but it's fine and well for us to speak to stakeholders or consultation bodies. We need to speak to the citizens of our region, because they'll give us a real version. That is challenging because, this is the first time we've done it at this scale across all 10 local authorities. We need to find ways to do that where we genuinely get the voice of a wide range of people coming through and a wide range of communities. That is going to be challenging, but I look forward to bringing back, some of the plans around that and how we hope to achieve that in a way that's meaningful. It's not, and to reassure, it's not just a series of online surveys. Hopefully you've seen from the consultation plan, there's going to be a wide range of engagement methods that we'll adopt. Claire, anything else you want to add to that end?
Yeah, in terms of the enterprise zones and the airport and that, obviously this is just a case of change. So, we're just dipping our feet in and touching on it at the moment, but when we're preparing the plan over the next few months, then obviously we're going to have to expand on that hugely to bring into account the CCR Energy, the airport, etc. In terms of the rural transport, we have updated that on the back of what Councillor Maybe said the last time. So we have alluded to the fact that there's issues around rural transport now and the lack of buses, particularly around school transport as well. So we will be expanding on that, in the actual plan, but it's definitely identified in there as a heading in the actual case for change now, since the briefing session.
Thanks, Claire. I'll move to Julian, please. Julian Sedman, thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm speaking on behalf of the Brecons Beacons National Park Authority, which is clearly another very rural part of South East Wales. One thing I was in the presentation a little bit uncertain about was in terms of the modes of transport. I think it was shown on page 19 of the presentation. Cycling didn't appear, as far as I could remember, on those modes. Now, cycling in itself is quite a problem, I guess, in some respects, particularly for certain types of travel. But I think we need to think about it linked in both to our public transport system to make sure public transport is not just seen as a single mode, but as a dual mode sometimes, with cycling and walking as being part of it. And as we develop our employment sites, to make sure that cycling infrastructure and indeed walking infrastructure, particularly from public transport nodes, is kind of built into this. Now, it may well already be included, but I thought it needs to be flagged up as part of sustainable transport in what we're doing. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thank
in
you.
terms of cycling, it comes into the active travel heading, so it's walking and pedestrians and cycling. It's very much part of the plan in terms of under active travel as part of the package. So I apologise if it hasn't been identified so as clearly as it should be, but it'll definitely be in the plan.
Thank you, Claire. So we go to Councillor Morgan, please.
Yeah, just listening to Catherine when she's saying about bigger vehicles on roads. Talking to a industrialist yesterday, where they were highlighting it's not just bigger vehicles, it's going to be a lot heavier vehicles. You know, with the change of modes to electric and hydrogen, those vehicles can be up to about 2 ton heavier moving forward. So I think there's also the problem of extra weight on the road, but with weight restrictions, it could mean that they can carry less freight. So, you know, that's something else that I think we need to take into account. And also with electric vehicles, I know starting to look at car parks and the effect they will have on car parks, especially multi-storey car parks moving forward. You know, a lot of them could actually create a problem that some of these might not have the weight that's required, and we could lose quite a few of them.
Thanks, Councillor Morgan. Just on a slight side note with electric vehicles, obviously from CCR perspective, we've done quite a lot of work in that area. And yes, it's worth reflecting on the fact that this is an initial 5-year plan. What we'd like to see is, as a strategic development plan comes forward in 2030, that we then start to see an alignment between these two plans. That's very much the clear goal. So this being an initial 5-year plan, and also our first regional transport plan to speak of, I think it is going to be you know, a case of trying to focus on some of the immediate problems, but with a view to the longer term ambition, and I hope that's come out of the case for change. Thank you. I will go back to Councillor Death again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. With regard to electric vehicles, what opportunities do you think we can include in the plan to encourage EV charging for taxis and public service vehicles, including those belonging to the emergency services? And also, what can we do to encourage new developments to have EV charging infrastructure, and ideally do that on a regional basis? There's consistency. There's much scope for pushing that.
Yeah, Claire, can I defer to you, because I know that you've worked extensively on this as part of your role with CCR, so perhaps you could answer that.
Yeah, in respect of charging infrastructure, obviously this year we will be putting in our 1000th charger across the region, 7 and 22 kilowatt chargers. And there's been a lot of work done in terms of the taxis. You know, we've got 31 dual chargers across the region at the moment, which a lot of which are being requested to be opened up to the public as well. In respect of fleet vehicles, there's been some challenge fund studies done on fleet vehicles that we're hoping to expand on to roll out, you know, potentially longer term. There's also we put our first bus charging infrastructure into Merthyr bus station, which the charging infrastructure itself is not in there at the moment, you know, because it'll be subject to future demand, but all of the cabling is there, done and ready. In my own point of view is that when we started the task of charging infrastructure and through the CCR and through the City deal, it was because of huge market failure. But that's not necessarily the case anymore. You know, we've got a lot of companies coming to us, you know, offering funding to be able to deliver the infrastructure. It's the procurement process, which is the stumbling block, and the policy which we need to address to enable that to happen, to open it up so that we can have the infrastructure funded by the commercial sector, but it's the mechanism to enable that to happen without having to go through the planning processes, etc. Because at the moment we don't need to do that, because we're doing it ourselves because we own the infrastructure, for example. So we're trying to work out a way now of how we can push that forward with the commercial sector to make it as transferable as possible in what we've done to date, but taking that a step further to enable the commercial sector, but also getting a return from it, either through a share of profit because it's on our land, or a lease, a long-term lease, for them putting that infrastructure on our land. So we're hoping to work through that over the next 12 months to enable, and come back with a solution, hopefully embed it into the regional transport plan. But also, for example, when we were in MIP and we were talking to people from Paris, where they've got policies in their LDPs, etc., where it says that, if a car park is bigger than a certain size, then they have to have the renewable energy on site to be able to power the charging infrastructure. And whether we want to put policies like that into our long-term strategic development plan and our transport plan, that's all things that we're looking into at the moment.
It's
really useful, Claire. Thank you.
It's a terrific point, Councillor Dathel, because it is really, this group is an empowered subcommittee as part of a new of the CJC. These are the debates we need to have. These are the discussions we need to have, and what we think it's right to be ambitious and bold. And that these are some of the conversations we need to take forward. Thank you. And finally, I think at the moment, Councillor Clark, if that's okay, please.
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, obviously apologise, because obviously Councillor Howes, whose portfolio this comes under, couldn't attend today from Newport, so I've been asked to attend in her place. So hopefully I get this right. Now, I believe there was a workshop a couple of weeks ago, and our Deputy Leader, Deb Davis, attended, and the Burns report was discussed and was brought up, and for obvious reasons for Newport, but also the effect for the whole region. And we believe that it would be included, and we can't see it. But then does this go back to Claire's point about it will, in a couple of months, it could be included, because that's what we thought from a Newport point of view. I would have seen it included in the documentation today, but I'm sure there's a reason for it, but I needed to highlight that.
The Burns is definitely identified in the document. It might be just a couple of words, but it is definitely identified in there. The guidance from Welsh Government clearly states that we have to take Burns into account. So yes, it's definitely going to be as part of the regional transport plan. Like I said, it might just be a one sentence in the whole document at the moment, but it definitely identifies that Burns has to be taken into account, and that's definitely in the guidance from Welsh Government that it does need to be incorporated into the regional transport plan.
Yeah, Councillor Clark, to respond to that as well, absolutely. We've had really productive meetings with colleagues from Newport as well, with officers from Newport in this regard. And like you say, this is a region-wide concern. It's not just about Newport, so thank you for raising that. It's a really important point. And yeah, so we'll continue to have those conversations and understand how and how we articulate that in the plan itself and in the delivery plan critically. If there are no further questions, if members don't mind and Chair doesn't mind, we can pass to Transport for Wales to present on the scheme prioritisation tool, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's one, but I think that it's worth just a quick clarification is that people have been talking about the consultation. I'm assuming that as well as the discussion that's been ongoing here, that the member local authorities would be able to submit their own comments into the consultation, because there are much broader issues in terms of, I mean, I could be terminally irritating on this, can't I? But it's trying to get a strategic fit between planning and transportation is really important. Stuff like, you know, don't have gentrification around train stations and the rest of communities being cut adrift, and, you know, a whole range of other things which I won't go into. So I think it's quite important that we're able to put together comprehensive submissions to the consultation as that goes forward. So I just wanted to raise that. I could see people sort of trying to make sure that they got everything in today. Well, there's always going to be something you think about
Absolutely.
when we close this meeting. So I think we need to do that. So yes, if we could go over to the prioritisation, scheme prioritisation section.
And I'll thank you, Chair, and I'll pass to Lee Vaughan from Transport for Wales, who's going to present on that.
Thank you, Colin. Yeah, I'll just quickly share my slides. Take a moment. Thank you. I just want to say up front that this prioritisation tool, and it's been a real benefit of it, has been collaborating with the CJC and obviously officers during its development. And yeah, I just hope that comes through on these slides. We've gone through several iterations of it, and I think we've got to a really good point with it now, which I'll present on today. I'm Louis Vaughan, a Senior Transport Planner at TFW. I'm on the call today with my colleague Rob Jones, but I'll be presenting on the prioritisations tool today for the RTP, which we've developed. So I'll come to the first slide. So the RTP brings together many local authorities for regional working. This means that there are many existing and potential projects across each CJC area with great potential. So you probably see on screen there, we've got three light-hearted examples. I don't think these are going to materialise in reality with the faces on screen there of the people holding them up. So we've got Roth Lake Submarine, jet skis on Valley Rivers, and hoverboard hire in Monmouth and Cowbridge. I must stress again that these are for the purposes of the presentation, just to give a good example, but yeah, light-hearted. So the scheme prioritisation tool aims to help you and your teams agree on what order your schemes pursued. So we've got the list on scheme there with Roth Lake at the top, jet skis on the Valley Rivers, and hoverboard hire, Monmouth and Cowbridge. So the regional transport plan sets the vision for what you want to achieve, including your agreed objectives. The transport delivery plan sets out your list of transport schemes in prioritised order for the region. What the prioritisation tool does is how you get from one to the other. So just a bit of a brief background to the tool and what we used to develop it. So we looked at a number of tools to inform the development of the prioritisation tool. This includes the Metro's Enhancements Framework, which uses a broad range of objective and easily measurable criteria relevant to Welsh policy. The Wales Railboard prioritisation. This lent heavily on cost-benefit analysis and value for money in achieving modal shift. Obviously, we only focused on one mode as well, just specifically on rail schemes. Within the RTP, we have to incorporate all modes. So we took some lessons learned from this and then applied it into the RTP prioritisation tool. The CCR Metro Programme Strategic Outline Case Appraisal. So this appraised scheme based on their contribution to the Wales Transport Strategy, whilst considering deliverability and risks. We really like this and the appraisal approach to this, using a qualitative approach, also considering deliverability and risks. But we felt we needed a bit more of a regional flavour when it came to the prioritisation too, from feedback from officers, members, and obviously the CJC. There's also the Active Travel Scheme Prioritisation Tool, which forms Appendix K in Active Travel Act guidance. This takes a geographic lens to schemes, taking account of population catchment and improved access to services. What we really liked about this approach was the data-led approach of it. So you're able to use quantitative data to kind of substantiate the prioritisation and order of schemes. And also the geographic element of it as well, using that data. So you'll be able to then pick out trends and potential impact schemes may have on those trends. So using that kind of like overall background, we developed kind of like a rationale for the tool and through collaboration with obviously key stakeholders. That was key to respond to regional objectives, as I mentioned earlier. Provide a reliable and objective appraisal of schemes, taking advantage of data and GIS analysis where possible. Provide a qualitative appraisal of schemes to ensure nuance and human elements are captured. I'll come onto this a bit further later on in this slide. Primarily, we wanted the tool to be flexible, so allow additional criteria to introduce as they emerge, looking at that data kind of approach. Could be used across schemes at different stages of development. I think this is really key when we look at new emerging schemes within the regions and ones that are already existing or going through development at the moment in the wild tag process. Can be used for whole programs and projects within those programs. So, for example, if you've got a large corridor scheme, which formed of separate smaller elements, you would assess the corridor in its entirety, but then also those separate smaller elements to maybe pick off lower hanging fruit that's more affordable in the shorter term. And can be used across schemes, different types and sizes. So across modes and obviously different types and sizes as well. So taking into account that some of these schemes may not have a geographic element at the moment. I think one of the councils pick on the core electric vehicle charging in terms of determining locations for that at the moment. Something of scheme of that ilk can go through this prioritisation tool and still be able to raise the objectives, even though there might not be that geographic data to really drive it forward or enrich the appraisal. And I just come in onto this point again, which I mentioned earlier. The order of priority is advised by each school. That includes a qualitative score agreed by the CJC. This sort of score and the quantitative data it generates is intended to enable informed discussion about the order of the priority, not dictate it. So the data within the tool and the metrics that we identify against each objective is there to support the overall appraisal and add some objectivity to it and supplement that justification. Ultimately, it's still down to qualitative justification to determine the kind of like impact that each scheme will have against each regional objective. So how will it be used? So this sets out the key steps in a regional transport plan. So as Colin and Claire went through earlier in the meeting, the first stage of the regional transport plan is identify challenges and opportunities in each region, appraise and agree smart objectives that address those challenges, develop a long list of schemes including new and existing proposals to meet those objectives, option sifting to set aside schemes that other funding and delivery mechanisms. So currently the rail and trunk road schemes are subject to a different prioritised order. We are looking, there is still option to include those schemes within the prioritisation tool, and that's at the discretion of each CJC whether they decide to include those schemes further in the prioritisation tool to see how they holistically fit within all schemes, or they can be discounted at this stage. Use the prioritisation tool to appraise schemes at a high level against the objectives and deliverability and criteria. So here at step 5, there is the opportunity to sift out schemes that have a large adverse impact on the regional objectives or are considered undeliverable for legal, environmental constraint issues. And then ultimately use the prioritisation tool to conduct more detailed appraisal using the available data, as I'll come back to the GIS data that further mentioned, which will be provided more detail on the next slide. So here we have an example objective, TP07, which Claire shared on the slides earlier. So reduce greenhouse gas emissions, air pollution and noise emissions from road transport by 60% by 2035 through a reduction of private car miles and enabling the low carbon vehicle rollout, including electric and hydrogen vehicles, supported by an evidence-based charging infrastructure program. Sorry, I'm just losing my voice a little bit there. The data sets we've got to support that are the number of NOx and AQMAs within 400 meters of the scheme per kilometre, the number of noise important areas within 400 meters of the scheme per kilometre, and then the average population within 1.1 kilometres scheme per kilometre. So these key data sets there really touch upon that objective, and it's using metrics to kind of really quantify the impacts that a scheme might have on that objective. I will stress again that these metrics are there to inform the overall appraisal, so the overall score. So, for example, average population in taking into account the potential modal shift of a scheme, so therefore the reduction in greenhouse gases to sustainable modes, or even the impact that a scheme might have on a potential population and its impact, the impact that air quality might have on that potential on that population within the catchment. So there you can see the metrics on screen. We've used 1.1 kilometres for the average population, as that's considered the average walking trip and 400 meters for the other two metrics, as that's the industry recognized standard. So it comes on to the deliverability and risk appraisal. So this takes in account of a range of criteria, including environmental impact issues, land issues, planning consent and legal, stakeholder acceptability, consultation, constructability, and disruption. We've got criteria and scoring mechanism and method and descriptions that go behind this to obviously support the practitioner as well. So I'll come on to this slide here. So we've got Roth Lake Submarine. Ultimately, we have the appraisal against the objective score and the delivery of risk appraisal score. As you can see here, Roth Lake Submarine scores quite well against the objectives and the deliverability and risk. There is the opportunity to weight particular objectives or the objectives over the deliverability and risk criteria, for example, but this is completely at the discretion of the CJC. As you can see on screen, we've got the prioritised list there on screen there. As you can see, Jetseas on the Valley Rivers scores higher against the objectives and deliverability and risk appraisal. Therefore, it would be suggested to be number one. And that brings the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. Appreciate that. To note as well, the slides that were shared, the pack that was shared with members, gives fuller details as well. That's just an overview, but the pack gives full details, as members will have seen as well. Thank you. Chair, happy to take questions at this point.
Super. I can't see any hands up at the moment. I think people are in absorbing mode. But Dan, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. Really good presentation, Louis. Thank you so much. A couple of quick questions from me, if that's all right. At the briefing we had, I think it was a couple of weeks ago now, we discussed a couple of possible alternatives to this tool, and I didn't know whether you'd had any further reflections on those. And how will the tool be refined to demonstrate how effective it will be at prioritising transport schemes and initiatives? Is that possible?
That's a good point.
So in terms, sorry, Councillor, in terms of the alternatives that are mentioned in the members briefing, I'm not quite sure exactly what alternatives are mentioned. I remember there was road review mentioned as part of the appraisal criteria, carbon as part of the deliverability and risk criteria. But in terms of the tool, I'm not quite certain in terms of alternatives we've got at the moment. We've developed it in collaboration with the CJC and officers. But yeah, particularly, I think, sorry, coming on to your second part of your question around kind of like the effectiveness of it, I think, yeah, we'll really see kind of like the results that come out of it, out of the tool, in terms of that prioritize list and the effectiveness of being able to prioritize the tool, prioritize schemes. We've already run schemes through it using the data, and we found that the tool does provide really good results with the ability to use the data as a justification for that appraisal and score. So with respect to that comment, I think it does. We have already done that test and it's shown to provide really good results. It'll also be a tool that's obviously peer reviewed by all officers during its development and the development and appraisal of each scheme. So we have got that kind of assurance in place.
Councillor Death, just to respond to that as well on the second point, I use the term stress test not lightly. We are going to absolutely push this tool to the limit. Sorry, Louis, but we really need to push this hard because, look, it's not definitive. There is much that needs to be done around it. But the only way we're going to see how well this works, we've started to agglomerate those schemes to look at them, to push them through, and also to remember as we refine those objectives and we make them smart, that will increase the sort of ability of the tool to prioritise. But we're not, as Louis said clearly as part of the presentation, it's a tool. So yeah, I look forward to coming back with some of those perhaps examples of how it works, where we've pushed it, where we've improved it. But stress testing is absolutely what needs to happen with something like this. Sorry, Claire.
Yeah, Councillor Diath, you did say about setting agreed levels of funding the last time. You know, I did note down what you said. It's just that the time in between the briefing and now we haven't had much time to reflect on that. So over the next couple of months, obviously this tool is iterative at the moment, and like Colin said, you know, we're going to have to stress test it and see, you know, how it works, etc. So, you know, over the next few months, hopefully we will be able to look at these alternatives, you know, like Kyle mentioned about different models for private finance, for example, as well, in the briefing that we need to address as well over the next couple of months. So hopefully we'll be able to bring something back tested and maybe some various options by time September comes.
Great stuff. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Got a hand up from Stephen Williams, please.
Yeah, thank you. Who's going to be involved in the stress testing then? Is it going to be sort of partners from the regions, or was it a select group?
No, partners from the region. Obviously, we take it through the Regional Transport Authority Officers Group as well. But obviously, Transport for Wales would do that testing on our behalf. But obviously, anything that we want them to take into account, we as in the Regional Transport Officers Group as well, you know, we can, and anybody in that group who wants to be involved, we welcome.
Yeah, I think it's really critical to point out every fortnight we have officers are good enough to give us you know, an hour and a half, 2 hours of their time, and that's been really critical. Just the, you know, not just do they give us their time, they come along. Our officers have been, as officers, I believe we work well together. And the attendance is great, Claire, isn't it? So we're really, really appreciative, because this isn't a CCR endeavour, it's a regional across 10 local authorities endeavour. So
you're
that's
volunteering, Steve.
I think I wouldn't mind involvement in it, if possible, somebody from our place. So happy. Thank you. So
okay.
Rob, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I think it's just important, just picking up on that point that Stephen's made, just to emphasise that Transport for Wales, though we're developing and testing this tool, we won't actually be applying it ourselves. So that will be done through Claire and your technical support that you've got with CCR. So we're staying neutral on that. We'll provide guidance and advice and information that's needed for the team to do that. But we're staying independent of the actual process of applying this tool, and then obviously the decisions that are made around that, because it is just a tool and it's just evidence to inform sensible decisions. So I don't know if that's reassuring, Steve.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, that concludes the presentations, and I refer back to Chair for recommendations.
Super. Thanks, Colin. I think the recommendations that we've got before us are that we note the progress made against the regional transport plan, and secondly, recommend the draft case for change and draft scheme prioritisation tool be endorsed by South East Wales CJC, and request that South East Wales CJC authorise officers to undertake consultation with relevant stakeholders and consultation bodies. If I could just clarify, because would we be endorsing it for consultation?
Yes.
Rather than endorsing it? And I think I would like to put that extra 2 words in, because we are endorsing it to go forward for consultation. I think
it's
that's
not the final document. It's not the final document. I get what you're saying, yeah.
And I think that, because it's one of those strange things, is one of my favourite sayings is you can tick all the boxes and completely miss the point. And so I think that this consultation is probably critically important to make sure that we've covered all angles as we go forward. So on the basis of adding in those extra 2 words, firstly I need a proposer and seconder, and I'm told then we have to go all the way around the houses to get agreement. So if I can have a proposer and seconder. So Catherine proposing, have we got a seconder? Bronwyn, super, thanks. And then if I go round, I've got a list in front of me. I think we've already lost one person, but we'll have a go. So first of all, we've got Blaenau Gwent. I think that's Councillor Morgan.
Yes.
Super, thanks. I think Councillor Farr from Bridgend has had to leave, but I think we're still quorate, unless there's somebody else substituting. Councillor George from Caerphilly.
Yes.
Yeah, super. Councillor Death from Cardiff.
Yes.
Brilliant. Councillor Simmons from Merthyr Tydfil.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Maybe from Monmouthshire. Yeah, I know it's silly because you just proposed it, but you've got to say yes. Councillor Howells from Newport is her apologies have been received, so that's Councillor Clark, isn't it? You're deputising.
It is, yeah, and yes.
Super, thank you. Councillor Crimmins from Rhondda Cynon Taf.
Yes.
Councillor Owen from Torvine.
Yes.
Great. And Councillor Brooks from the Vale of Glamorgan.
Yes.
Super. So that sounds like we've got agreement on that. Thank you all, and thank you for the in-depth discussion of those. So that can go forward to CJC. For us, that's the end of our main meetings. It's just the date of the next ordinary meeting where you'll have Councillor Morgan back to chair then, which is Thursday the 19th of September at 9:30. And so we can just close the formal meeting, and I'll ask Simon to confirm that the recording's been stopped. But as I said, if we can stay online